Hello.
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 Do we start now?
Okay.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Oh, to live. Okay. Good evening. Good evening to all. Repeat হচ্ছে।
Oh, Martin, yeah.
Unmute. My sound is echoing here.
No, your sound is not equal. It is because of Martin.
Okay. Good evening to all, and welcome to a very special meet. A meet with John Holloway, one of the finest thinkers of our time. And welcome, John. Welcome to this wonderful evening. And
Thank you.
we gather here to talk to listen to John. And we already mentioned that mentioned his trilogy. Two of the trilogy already published, and one is forthcoming, Hope in Hopeless Times. We gather here on the occasion of publication of his Bengali version of second book of the trilogy, Crack Capitalism, which was published in the year 2010. And first book was published in 2002. And these two books actually start international debate. And first book, after the publication of first book, Change the World Without Taking Power, The Meaning of Revolution Today. This book, practically after 20 years, it is recognized that this book has created a radical crack in the world of radical thinking. And in fact, it is time to celebrate the 20 years of Change the World Without Taking Power. I just like to mention that these three groundbreaking books are not the product of this century. In fact, behind the writing of these three books, John covered a huge, long years of relentless critique of capital, rather critique of labor. And it began in the mid-70s with his involvement with Edinburgh Conference of Socialist Economics, with his contribution in the journal Common Sense, and after that contributing in the series of volumes of Open Marxism, editing Open Marxism. And in 1991, he came from England to Mexico. And in 1994, January, after the uprising of Zapatista movement, he immediately responded, immediately embraced practically the movement, and outcome we got a edited book of John Holloway and Eloina Pelaez, Zapatista, Reinventing the Revolution in Mexico. And first he focused the essence of the Zapatista movement. That essence, Zapatista movements in their first, one of the first communiques, they stated in that way that we lost everything, but one thing remained that returned back to our heart, and that is dignity. And John focused, brought attention of us in that particular word, first in that book, and then he developed and explored manifold significance of dignity in Crack in several chapters. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Our friend Dr. Anandamoy Rai, who will share his experiences of reading the Bengali version of Crack, Fatol Dhorao Punjibade. He can't access here. Okay. Okay, we can start again. So here we are, we sit together, and of course it is true that most of us, many of us, do not know John Holloway. The name is little known to them. And it is also true that some of us have read like me, one or two books of John. Of course, some of us have intense reading of radical literatures, including John, like Martin Progolvo here. In fact, I'm grateful to him. I got the book first from him, perhaps in the year 2016 or 17. And they are actively involved in studying, in publishing journals. Martin is publishing the journal with his friends, City Notes, online journal, City Notes collectives. city notes collectives. He will better speak for themselves. Okay, perhaps Dr. Anandamoy Rai still can't access to us.
Hello, John. Hi.
Hello. Yes.
Hello. Hi. Hi. It is a great. We have what we are experiencing is something not the daily experience. It is something special for me and comrades and friends who are trying to being a part of collective, being part of a co-inquiry with Radical Notes, and after Radical Notes we have this City Notes collective. So basically, this is Delhi based. Our inquiry is Delhi based, largely Delhi and neighborhood. So from our experience, from our questions, we have already encountered John Holloway in many different ways. And everywhere there is a question, there is John Holloway. So within the movement, within and especially after this crash of 2008 and around the NCR, National Capital Territory, the industrial new emerging industrial belt where resistance rebellions were erupting time and again, from Honda Union to especially the Maruti Suzuki worker unions, Maruti Suzuki insurrection, and the unionist politics emerging around that event, and all those things, and even the social movement which was emerging in the city life. 16 December was a radical feminist uprising in Delhi after a very dreadful event of raping and murder of a young working woman in Delhi in night, and the social movement erupts. And so those questions were coming from the inquiry ki how the generalization, the revolutionary generalization, how to inquire the revolutionary generalization of these eruptions after 2010 and onwards. So we have encountered Holloway in two different ways, and I will say ki there are two generations of young activist inquirers who are criticizing the way the mainstream communist left have organized themselves or reorganized themselves in neoliberal times, and a continuous critique, how to criticize, a radical critique was necessary within the movement. So working class self-organization, the question of Italian autonomism was already with us. Tronti and Negri and all, Federici and Della Costa, we were encountering with them in our inquiry, and through that critique we have encountered as City Note inquiry with Holloway the negativity part of the movement, the negative of the movement, which was a critique within autonomia, which in the book in the Bengali translation Eden have put it very sufficiently. He have inquired, he have presented this journey of open Marxism and Tronti plus Adorno and all those things. But from our own limitations, we have encountered Holloway in the movement. And there was a Hindi translation of Change the World Without Taking Power in 2009 by Lal Bahadur Verma. He was a comrade, he was a historian teaching in Allahabad, and he had translated so many books, and he was very much the echoing of the Change the World Without Taking Power was re-emerging in different ways. So the generation Lal Bahadur Verma belonged was a generation of national liberation movements, Naxalbari movement, the Naxal movement, the Maoist movement in 60s, 70s, national liberation movements. So our generation, which was encountering with the problems, was the generation who just started thinking about the world, changing about the world in the backdrop of national politics. There was a communist tendency inherently was there in the peasant rebellions, which was the rebellion of the subalterns and all those things. So they have encountered change the world without taking power. We have encountered with this crack capitalism in 2010 after the crisis, and we are waiting for hope. We are waiting for some messianic Benjaminian intervention. That is the nature of the revolutionary, insurrectionary, communizing the movement, which is time and again being ruthlessly murdered by the forces of a state, that is the forces of money already. We are inquiring this immediacy and the rise of authoritarianism under the dictatorship of neoliberal capital, the impersonal and personal, the dialectics of the money and the authoritarian personal dominance, which is during this pandemic time, there are different ways they are productivizing us, they are enforcing us. And the language of capital in subcontinent is the language of Hindu, Hindu, Hindu Rashtra, Hindu nation. How to break Hindu nation is the question of how to break the rule of money. That is what the challenge we are facing today with all those comrades, with all those activists. So this is time for listening you actually.
Okay. Tomader o sonko tonpad. Sorry, thank you very much. It's dreadful pronunciation, and I haven't learned it properly. But really, it's my way of saying, say deeply, deeply, thank you very much. This is really exciting to be here with you. No, thank you so much, really so much to Prabhas for doing the translation. Thank you, Martin, and thanks as well to the all involved in the Tabuo Projas initiative for producing this really lovely edition, which I have here. And yeah, terrific. And from what you were saying just now, Martin, I suppose it makes me feel even more profoundly how ignorant I am of just what is happening in India and how exciting it would be to go there one day and actually meet you all. No? But for the moment, you are there. I am here in Mexico. For me, it is morning. And obviously, I don't know exactly. I don't know, and I can't see the people that we are speaking to. But I'm sure that whatever their different views, one thing I think is that for everybody who is listening, we have a common starting point. And the starting point is, in the beginning, is the scream. No, really a scream, a feeling of anger, a feeling of horror at the world that we see around us, a feeling of constant shock, I'm sure very much in India, as here in Mexico, at the poverty we see at the traffic lights, at the poverty we see in the streets, at the violence, a feeling of horror, a scream when we read of the migrants who every year, more than 1,000 migrants, African migrants, are drowned in the Mediterranean Sea. No? A feeling of, horror at what we see and what we experience. A scream of reaction that says, no, that cannot be. No, that cannot be the world. That cannot be the truth of the world. And not just horror at what we see, but I think more and more, it is also a scream against the future that is threatening us. No? A future of global warming, a future and the present, of course, as well, of the destruction of biodiversity, increasing shortages of water, and a dynamic that seems to be leading us towards human extinction. And our scream usually starts, or very often starts, with something particular. It is something in particular that makes us angry, that makes us think, no, that cannot be. But then we see other things that shock us, that horrify us, and we begin to understand that behind these particular things, there is a system. And then when we look at what is happening in the world, that we look at the movement that seems to be taking, or may well be taking us towards the extinction of humanity, then we think not only that we're caught in a system, but that we're caught in a dynamic of destruction. And it feels sometimes as if we're sitting on a train, strapped into our seats, and that somehow we feel we don't know where this train is going, but we feel that it may be taking us towards extinction. And somehow we have to try and stop the train. Or as Walter Benjamin said, somehow we have to try and pull the emergency brake. No? Somehow we have to break this dynamic. No? But we don't know how. We need to break the existing social dynamic, and that means breaking in a radical way the current organization of society. It means breaking the power of money and the dynamic of money, which of course is the power of capital. But sometimes I feel it helps to think of it in terms of money. No. So we need starting from our scream, we know that we need revolution, but just to talk of revolution seems ridiculous now in 2022. It seems ridiculous because we know that the revolutions of the 20th century proved generally disastrous in terms of their effects on people's lives. We know that thousands and thousands and thousands of people lived with the hope of transforming the world, and then died for that hope. But we know also that in the cases where they were successful, often that success was far worse than anything that they could have imagined. So we're in this situation where we feel the need for revolution, but we don't know how to do it. We don't know how to do it because we grew up with a model of what revolution would look like, that it would mean taking control of the state. But that didn't work. No, that didn't work. And that really leaves us with two options. And I think this is really what is happening in the world. One option is to give up the idea of revolution, not to give up the idea of struggle, because in a way, we're pushed into struggle all the time just by what is happening around us, the way in which we are attacked, the dreadful things that we see and experience. We are pushed into all sorts of struggles in factories, struggles in universities, struggles against violence against women, struggles against the destruction of nature. So that the struggles are there, and they're at times very, very powerful. But often, I think, attention somehow has turned to particular struggles, and the notion of revolution is just forgotten. Okay, so the hope of actually creating a society based on the mutual recognition of people's dignities is lost, and hope becomes broken down into a series of hopes. No, perhaps we can create a society where there is not the same destruction of nature. Perhaps we can create a society where women have the same, live in the conditions equal to men. Perhaps we can create a society that is not based on racial discrimination. But the actual idea of revolution fades away. Or maybe it doesn't, maybe it's not rejected, but people stop talking about it. And I think that's a real problem. It's a real problem, not because these struggles are not important. It seems to me they are absolutely very important. And they are the way, I mean, those struggles must exist all the time. They are the way to move forward. But if those struggles do not overflow into the question of radical revolutionary transformation, then okay, we can improve certain things, but we are still sitting on the train that is taking us towards extinction, unless we can break the logic of money, the logic of capital. Then we are still, things may improve in some ways, get worse in other ways, but we are still sitting on this, in this dynamic that reproduces all the time oppression in different ways and is still pushing us towards, possibly towards extinction, certainly towards more and more inhumane conditions. So that's why I think, and I suppose this is really what the three books are about, is that we have to come back to the question of revolution. And we have to say, well, it didn't work. It didn't work in the 20th century. Then why? What can we do? How can we think of revolution today? Or is it possible still to think of revolution? Because I think what happens as well is that very often if we grew up with the idea of revolution, it is very difficult for us to say later on, oh, no, that was a mistake. So sometimes we keep on thinking of revolution, but without really thinking about whether it is still possible. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to kind of criticize ourselves, question ourselves, and say, look, revolution is absolutely necessary, but how? How do we think about it? No. And I think the first thing we have to say is that, okay, it didn't work in the 20th century, and it didn't work, okay, for particular reasons in all sorts of places. But there was one central idea in the revolutionary concept of the 20th century, which was that we should take state power and then transform society through the state. And that's what didn't work. I think we have to think, no, it doesn't go that way. And it doesn't go that way because the state is a particular form of organization. It is a form of organization that concentrates attention or the administration of change in a group of professionals. So the state, by its very existence, tells us to go home. No, it says we get angry, we campaign against, against the destruction of towns by mining companies. We fight for changes in the educational system, whatever. And the state says, well, yes, we hear you. Now go home and we'll solve it. And sometimes they don't solve it at all, because the answer may be simply repression and violence. And sometimes they just try and find a way of keeping us in their houses. But really, that's what the state is. It's a process of exclusion of us. Not only that, but the state in the end cannot bring about radical change simply because, well, for two reasons, partly because the real power is not in the state. The real social power is in money, in capital, in the way, the structure of social relations. And also, and much worse, I suppose, because the existence of the state depends upon the reproduction of those social relations. The existence of the state depends on getting money to pay for its officials and carry out its activities. And the only way it can get money is by promoting the accumulation of capital. So the state, as a form of social relations, is tied to the reproduction of capitalist accumulation. So, yeah, different governments can certainly make improvements here and there, but there is no way that the state can actually break the dynamic of destruction. And I suppose that's what we're living at the moment, what we're seeing at the moment, for example, in all the conferences on halting global warming. No, I mean the COPs. No, and they set out their promises, what they're going to achieve. And whether they weren't, and whether they are honest, whether the particular officials are honest or not, it is becoming more and more evident that state organizations, even if they work together, are simply not able to achieve those aims because in the end of the day, they have to promote capital accumulation, and that means they have to promote profitability, and profitability often means taking measures that destroy the world that we live in. So we can't think that revolution goes through the state, which is really the theme of the first book of the trilogy of Change the World Without Taking Power. And then what happens? And then we're left with the question of, well, if it's not through the state, then how do we do it? How can we possibly do it? No? And when Change the World was published in 2002, I honestly thought, well, perhaps a few of my friends will understand what I'm trying to say. But in fact, there was this, which was terrific. There was this huge, huge reaction. And the reaction came really in three different ways. The reaction came firstly from people who said, well, that's complete nonsense. Of course we have to go through the state. The second reaction, which seemed to me much better, was a reaction from people who said, well, you don't convince me entirely, but we really have to rethink the question of revolution and what it means in the 21st century. And the third reaction was to say, well, yes, you're saying exactly, but thank you very much. You're saying what I've been thinking, or we've been thinking all along. It can't go through the state. But the problem is then how do we do it? How do we do it if it's not through the state? And how do we do it if it's not through movements centered on demands? Because demands are generally addressed to someone else. They're generally addressed to the state. So a demand-centered politics already implies the existence of focusing on the state as the important agent. And this was what I wanted to say. And really this is, when the first book came out, it was terrific because I was invited to lots and lots of meetings with different movements, groups that were trying to find a way forward, different factory occupations of supermarkets, all sorts of things. No? And I suppose I realized that, in fact, what people are doing already is moving away from the state and saying, well, we are going to create here and now different types. We are going to create here and now spaces, or perhaps just moments, or perhaps areas of activity where we refuse to follow the logic of money, where we will do different things, where we will decide what we are going to do, what it is that makes sense for us, or what we enjoy doing. And we are going to change the world in that way. I mean, this is, I suppose, basically, it's the idea of autonomous politics, no? Autonomist politics. The idea you don't build a party, you don't focus on demands, you go and create your own publishing house or social center or schools or communities where you say explicitly or perhaps implicitly, no, we're not here because we want to make money. We're here because we want to create a different world. No. And That's often seen in terms of autonomous politics. I suppose I prefer to think of cracks rather than autonomous spaces, simply because a crack for me implies some sort of movement. It's a crack in the texture of capitalist domination. And the crack is something that's movement that's constantly opening or perhaps being filled up again, but it's something that is constantly on the move. And once we begin to think of cracks, then I think our image of the world begins to change. We kind of move into a different geography in a way. We're used to think of the world in terms of spaces of domination. We think of the world very often in terms of states, or we think in terms of power coming from above, power over. And if we think, well, no, it's not really like that, or it's not just like that, there's a movement all the time in the opposite direction. And these movements in the opposite direction can be seen as cracks, and sometimes they're big cracks. I think of big cracks. I suppose I think of the Zapatista movement which has been now in public existence for 28 years, nearly 29 years. And they say, when you go into Zapatista territory, you pass signs that say, here the bad government does not control things. Here we ourselves decide. We are in control. And you get something similar. Of course, the other great big example, at least for us, is the Kurdish movement in Rojava, where they are working are creating in the most awful conditions of war. They are creating a society based not on state structures or state hierarchies, but on communal organization. I'm actually carrying, also a form of organization that transforms the position of women in society. And they have this practice of kind of learning how to do it all the time and creating these different structures with different logics in these very difficult situations. But it's not just the big things, it's also the small things. We can think of cracks in terms of, yes, as I said, the publishing house that says, well, what we're going to publish what seems to us to open the possibility of another world. Or we can think of, we can think of community gardens. We can think of occasions like this, where it is not in the interest of any of us. We're not thinking we're going to do this in order to make money. We're thinking we want to do this event in order to say, here, we are against the logic of capital. In order to say, here, now, we want to contribute in some way to the possibility of opening a different world. So we have cracks that are huge, cracks that are tiny, like this. And Prabhas mentioned dignity in the introduction. I think the notion of dignity is central to the notion of the crack. Now, here we are going to develop our own dignity. We will make mistakes. We will have different ideas of how to do things. But we are pushing towards social self-determination. And we are pushing towards a relation with other people based on mutual recognition. So we think in terms of assemblies or communes or different forms of social organization, different ways of doing things. Yeah, and this is something I'm sure anybody who is listening to this can think without any difficulty at all of, let's say, 10 different examples of these sorts of cracks, just from their own experience or the experience of people that are close to them. And in the center of this idea of cracks, I suppose, is the idea of a different sort of doing. No, we have our lives, we're going to do things in our lives, but we do not want to dedicate our lives to the labor that produces capital. Because we are against capital, we are also against labor. Because labor is not just activity, labor is a particular sort of activity dedicated or shaped by the need to reproduce capitalist social relations. Labor is, as Marx said, it's alienated labor, or as he says in Capital, it is abstract labor, labor that is abstracted from or removed from any particular meaning. No? But we all have experience as well of different sort of activity. We all, I think, have sort of this experience of saying, well, we don't actually want to dedicate our life activity to a purpose that is alien to us. We don't want to dedicate our life activity to the creation of a world that is literally destroying us. What we want to do and what we are trying to do is to develop all the time, I think, activities that have as their basis some sort of companionship, some sort of love, some sort of friendship, some sort of search for a meaning, I suppose, some sort of social meaning very often. No? And we can, those of us who are teachers, if we have good conditions, and I have very good conditions in that sense, can say, well, yeah, we're not going to teach our students to fit into the capitalist system. We're going to try and talk to them about how awful this system is and how much we need to emancipate our human richness, to emancipate our human potential by creating a different world. No, how much we need to think ourselves of existing, think of ourselves as existing not just in capitalism, which we do, unfortunately, but in, against, and beyond capitalism. No? That is where we need to go. That is how we need to push. No? And of course, all these cracks are contradictory. Sometimes they just last for a moment and then collapse. Sometimes, but then others open and more open. And sometimes they keep on and on and on. And sometimes they grow and grow. And the argument of crack capitalism is that the only way that we can now conceive of revolution is really in terms of the recognition, the creation, the multiplication, the expansion, and the confluence of these cracks. And is that enough? I don't know. We don't know. That's I suppose we don't know because we really don't. We're in a situation we're in a situation where we must hope, we must try and break out of this destructive dynamic. But we honestly don't know whether we are going to be able to do it, which is, in a way, the theme of the third book, Hope in Hopeless Times. But I'm not really going to talk about that because that I think it's going to come out next week or the week after, and that's very exciting. But I think just to finish, what I do want to emphasize is really this central notion of we don't know. No. Old style revolutionaries knew. They knew how to make a revolution, and they told other people how to make a revolution. I think we have to start by saying we don't know. And really for two reasons. The first is because it's true. We don't know. We don't know how to do it. We know it's necessary. We're not sure if it's possible. We don't know if we can avoid human extinction or human devastation. But the other point, really, for me, more important is that if we say from the beginning we don't know, then that already takes us into a different politics. If we say we know, then we're going into a hierarchical politics. We know, we will explain to the masses and tell them what to do. If we say we don't know, then that means that the only way that we can advance is by asking, by talking, by listening. No? As the Zapatistas put it, as one of their central principles, preguntando caminamos, asking we walk. It's by asking that we move forward. No? And that means then if we don't know, then that means, well, I don't know. What do you think? I don't know. What do you think? Let's talk about it together. And that means already that we're thinking in terms of some sort of, not of a party with a party line, but we're thinking in some terms of some sort of council organization, of some sort of assembly or communal organization, in which from the beginning we adopt forms of interaction that are anti-state. The state knows. The state tells us what to do. The state doesn't move by asking. They pretend to ask in lots of cases, but they don't really. No. Whereas if we say, no, what we don't know, therefore, we have to move forward by involving more and more people, I suppose, or seeing if more and more people want to come into a discussion of, well, how do we move forward? What can we do? And if we can do that, we are already beginning to change the world. Okay, thank you very much. And really, thank you so much for inviting me to Bengal. That's really, really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. And here is a humble question to you. Can you see? Can the cultural revolution be a force against capitalism in the 20th century? If so, in what way is it possible? It's a question to you, John.
Yes. I'm not sure what you understand by cultural revolution. If it's written with capital letters, so I suppose that it is a reference to China and the Maoist movement when in the when was it, the 70s? I don't know. My image of the Cultural Revolution, but this may be ignorance, is that it involved really a process of imposing certain ideas or certain ways of living upon people. And I suppose my idea of the cracks, or my idea of walking, we ask, is that really the only possibility of bringing about radical change is through, I suppose, through the self-creation of, or self-emancipation of our own richness, that it actually has to come from the people involved. I don't know if that's an adequate answer at all.
Okay, thank you, John.
I suppose if I think of cultural revolution, again, I really don't know what you understand by it. But if we think of cultural revolution as recreating or going back to a model of the past, then I would think that just simply will not work. No, we have to say no. In fact, anti-capitalist transformation has to involve a process of self-creation all the time. So in some ways, we have to cast aside the past. Of course, recognize traditions of struggle. Of course, pay honor to those who died in the past to create a different world. But we have to say, no, now we're in a different world. We have to invent our own ways of transforming it.
Okay. Anando, can you hear me?
হ্যাঁ আছি তো শুরু করবো
Yes, I just introduce you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening, Professor. I am Dr. Anand Moy Roy from Madhamgram, West Bengal, India. Yes.
Good evening. Good morning.
And he is my university mate, my hostel mate.
Yes. Prabhat
He's a student
Chaudhary
of English literature.
is not only my first friend, but also my university friend, hostel friend, and also the director of our theater performances. And I like his.
I received first reaction of Fatol Dhorao Punjibade from Sudipto Mukherjee, one of my friends, and second from Anand.
Okay.
So I requested him to share his experiences of reading the Bengali edition of Crack Capitalism. Yes, go on, please.
Thank you very much.
Anando, please.
I would start. I would start.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Uh, I would like to read out a few words on Professor Holloway's Crack Capitalism and its Bengali translation and editing by Prabhas Chaudhuri, Fatol Dhorao Punjibade, entitled Thoughtfully, very thoughtfully. At the very outset, I would like to confess that uh, I am not that fortunate one to go through the remarkable as well as valuable books of Professor Holloway. uh, for example, Change the World Without Taking Power, uh, published in 2002, Crack Capitalism 2010, In, Against and Beyond Capitalism, published in 2016. We are the Crisis of Capital, published in 2018, etc. So, but at present, I would find myself, uh, fortunate for going through the Bengali translation and editing of Professor Holloway's Crack Capitalism by Prabhas Chaudhuri, entitled Fatol Dhorao Punjibade. I prefer this title very much. Uh, Prabhas Chaudhuri's attempt has enabled to me, a petty reader, to touch Professor Holloway's mental makeup in my own way. In my own way. Besides, I would like to extend my warm thanks and greetings to Serimuddin Mundal, the Chief Navigator of Tobuo Prayash, for publishing such an interesting book that would help the common readers to find themselves in a broad spectrum of polemics. I think so. Then, the book Fatol Dhorao Punjibade has been compartmentalized into 8 parts. The first part reveals the process of cracking and passing through capitalism. The second part deals with an automatic politics of uh, antagonistic politics of honor with special reference to cracking. The third part exemplifies the crack on the fringe of impossibility. The fourth part says the dual character of labor. The fifth part believes in the abstract labor, which shows a gigantic abstraction. The sixth part gives an idea of the crisis of abstract labor. The seventh part, uh, the seventh part of the seventh part shows the tune of inner revolution. The eighth and the last part sings a song of dawn, indicating the time of birth of people's power. In addition, I would like to refer to different books and articles. Almanac of Rebellion, Ungrammatical Existence of Communism, and above all, ANA and UBI controversy lying on the way of Professor Holloway. The team of Dev Auden, Pratush Chandra, Mattand Pragal, and Monilata Chaudhuri gives the readers a reasonable scope of understanding Professor Holloway's Professor Holloway. We, the Bengali readers, should feel ourselves fortunate to have a message from the author. In peroration, I consider, sorry, in peroration, I expect Prabhas Chaudhuri's translation and editing of Professor John Holloway's Crack Capitalism, entitled Fatol Dhorao Punjibade, would open up a new vista in the arena of translation studies. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ananda. Dr. Anandamoy Rai.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Are you feel happy, Prabhas?
Yes, I am very happy. I am very happy to see you first after many, many years. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you all. Yes.
we return back to our viewers. If any question from the participants or we can now
If
conclude the meet.
I don't follow. I don't follow.
Oh, no, okay, Ananda.
Okay. Ah.
We are just going to conclude our meet.
Okay. Okay. Now, should I deliver some words in this meet?
Okay, you can mute. No
Okay.
problem.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. You please stay in the line. Stay and but muted. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. I just stop halfway in my attempt to introduce John before you. And what I like to point out here that John embraced Zapatista movement, we have seen, and after Change the World and Crack, after Change the World, we see the several significant movements are embracing John. Piquetaro movement in Argentina, Rojava movement, Rojava University is inviting John. The fighting Zulu people of South Africa, they are interacting with John's writings. They are introducing John with their communities. And Kurdish people, they are translating John's works in Arabic. Already Change the World is translated in Arabic. John Crack also translated in Arabic? Till not.
No, not yet.
So it is now a wave of thinking, and it is overflowing continuously. No, there are discontinuities, but continuity beneath the discontinuities. We are seeing that continuities, and at present we touch. We are embracing John. We are Bengali speaking readers of John, and also Martand is Hindi speaking, and his contribution in the Fatol Dhorao Punjibade, he and his friend Pratyush Chandra, they wrote a paper, and the name of the paper is Non-Grammar of Communism. Non-grammar or no grammar? No grammar of communism. Okay. John, in his preface of third edition of Change the World, he wrote that every book is like a revolution. Either we'll go forward or we'll die. We are seeing that Change the World without taking power, Crack Capitalism. These books are going forward and forward. And a light comes, though time is very dark, but the deepest root of darkness, from the deepest root of darkness, a light comes. অন্ধকারের উৎস হতে উৎসারিত আলো, সেই তো তোমার আলো, সেই তো আমার আলো, আমাদেরও আলো. And this light is light of knowledge. Perhaps what is called candlelight warmth of knowledge. জ্ঞানের বিষণ্ণ লোকী আলো. Our poet Jivanananda said, জ্ঞানের বিষণ্ণ লোকী আলো. But that light can make us bright like sun. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to all.
And one hello.
Yes, Martha.
No, this is just starting. Our meeting have just started with Holloway, and because of this limitation of viewers, some far away friends who were wanting to join Holloway in different parts other than Kolkata,
and the better options are available. We could not use that option.
Yes, we can have our meeting with City Notes Inquiry. This is just starting, and several people were wanting to interact with Holloway to share their experiences, their limitations within the movement, and those who are struggling with the revolutionary generalization in subcontinent. So we will organize someday in near future a meeting with Holloway where we can more share. We asking while walking can have more autonomous way to share.
And asking me walk and asking me dance.
Dancing we walk. Dancing we walk. So very, I really want to be part with the larger open dialogues with Holloway, with our more comrades and friends. So very thank you, Holloway. Very thank you.
Thank you very much. We hope very much that this is the beginning, and I would love to take part in another discussion with people. That would be terrific. And for the moment, really thank you profoundly for this. No? To Prabhas, to Anandamoy, to Martin, to all of you. So yes, we must continue, and we must dance asking.
fleet-footed dance. And we have seen that dance in Black Lives Matter movement, the fleet-footed dance of dignity.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you all and good night.
Good night and thank you.
And very good day to you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.